Learned this week that Kentucky and Ohio have signed off on a joint request for federal help with a solution to the Brent Spence Bridge. The huge double-decker bridge carries I-75 and I-71 traffic across the river between Kentucky and Ohio. It is named after late Congressman Brent Spence, who served Kentucky in the U.S. House more than 30 years. The bridge has been considered functionally obsolete and over-trafficked for years. U.S. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg talked with me about the project this week that would include a companion bridge and improvements to the existing span. Well, you made reference to Kentucky's issues and transportation and infrastructure, and the governors of Kentucky and Ohio have just signed a joint request this week for funding and the go-ahead for a companion bridge to improve the situation on the bridge that carries I-75 and I-71 traffic over the Ohio River. A huge part of the economy in this region of the country, the Brent Spence Bridge. Do you predict that that project can get done relatively soon despite its huge cost?
Well, it's a big undertaking, but it is exactly the kind of initiative that we have new resources to help support federally thanks to the President's law. And, I've had good conversations, including a joint meeting with Governor Beshear and Governor DeWine of Ohio, along with Jim Gray, of course, a Lexingtonian who's now leading the Kentucky Department of Transportation, and his Ohio counterpart, seeing people from across party lines, across state lines, across the river, talking about their shared vision for making sure something happens. When you have that kind of leadership at the state and local level, that goes a long way toward us being able to be good partners from the federal level. And I can tell you there's a lot of interest all the way to the top in this administration in making sure that we help here with this very important infrastructure issue.
Well, the governors are saying that this can likely be accomplished without tolls. Is that something that the Transportation Cabinet makes a goal of, to do a large-scale project like that without user fees or tolls, or is that wholly a state matter?
Well, I know a lot of drivers will appreciate that. It really does vary from state to state. We're trying not to impose a one-size-fits-all answer from here in Washington. We know that different states have different approaches and priorities. We support that. We work to make sure that anytime federal dollars are used, that they meet, of course, a very high standard of accountability. But we also support those local decisions, state-level decisions, in terms of what makes the most sense for people on the ground.
There's another project that people in our area watch: continued improvements to the Mountain Parkway. That's a road that links relatively isolated parts of Appalachia to the interstate system and Kentucky's more urban areas. Is it up to each state to determine what it can squeeze out of the federal dollars that are available in the infrastructure package?
Well, there's really two things going on. There's those state dollars. We send those out by a formula, and the state can make its own choices about how to prioritize them. And I do expect that the state will be looking at, smaller rural roads as well as some of those big highways you hear about the most. But we're also going to directly fund communities that come to us with ideas that say, look, if you were able to help us connect this region to the interstate highway system, or even introduce something like rural transit or support for electric vehicles, whatever's going to make the biggest difference in that area, that's something we can take a look at in the department too. So I would think of it as a both and fortunately we are working with resources that we haven't really been able to deploy in terms of the level of help that we now have ready in a generation. Last time there was this much work going on with roads and bridges in this country, the President of the United States was Dwight Eisenhower.
Well, will the supply issues that we have ongoing right now, or the country's response to the events in Europe, likely delay some of these infrastructure projects going forward, or make them more costly to the point that you have to go back and recalculate?
This is one of the reasons the President is also pushing very hard on the idea of building up more of an American manufacturing industry. The more that the things that we need, from steel to train cars, are manufactured right here on American soil, the less you have to worry about supply chains and whether something's ready sitting on a boat in China, for example. The President believes we can use the investments we're about to make to actually build up more of a domestic industry. And I'll tell you, we're already seeing a lot of response from that, from the automotive sector to other parts of the transportation construction industry. And that's really, I think, a big part of the long-term solution to these supply chain issues. Of course, we're going to buy and sell and trade with the rest of the world. But we got to be making a little more of it here at home if we want to be protected from these economic ups and downs that come with some of those supply chain issues.
And that was our discussion with Pete Buttigieg, who is the U.S. Transportation Secretary.